we didn't get to this in the last meeting, but that's the backgrounder on the...
Okay, well, good morning, I guess, everyone. It is a beautiful, beautiful sunny day. Not too many days we have heat warnings coming out of St. John, but beautiful, warm day, and welcome to today's Growth Committee meeting. So, members of the committee, just have an approval, please. A couple of changes, actually. We're just going to change the order up a bit. We'll have our Growing in St. John presentation from Mr. Crosby, and then we'll just deal with we'll move the municipal, the accommodation levy update just down slightly. The other two pieces I suspect are going to go through pretty quickly, but one of our members has to leave at 11 o'clock. So with that, can I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of May 14th? Thank you. Moved by the deputy, second by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. Or Councillor Sullivan. Councillor Armstrong, excuse me.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. On the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, anyone contrary-minded? Thank you. Okay, and next up, I'll ask our Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Ouellette, to introduce our guest speaker today, and maybe, Phil, just a reminder again, this is, I think, our third session now, and if you could just hit your button for me, Phil, we'll...
Great. Through your worship, we have this placeholder on every growth committee meeting, and it's entitled Growing in St. John. And the objective here is to identify individuals in our community that are part of this growing in St. John. And one of the things that's clear is that we're not trying to narrow in. It's not just business owners, it's not just newcomers, it's not just investors. The amount of individuals involved in what we call as growing our economy and growing our community is vast. And we think it's really important to profile it. And we want to use the platform of the Growth Committee to celebrate those stories. So today, very excited to have James Crosby here. I have a little intro for James. He's the fifth generation of the Crosby family to serve as the president of Crosby Molasses. James graduated from Queen's University with a Bachelor's of Commerce degree and holds a professional designation with the Canadian Logistics Institute. He serves on the board of directors of the Food and Consumer Products of Canada and the advisory board of the Faculty of Business at UNB St. John campus. He's also a valued member of the Young Presidents Organization and the Wallace McCain Institute. James is an outdoor enthusiast who enjoys skiing, baseball, and golf. He lives in Rosse with his family, with his wife and three children. So I'd ask James to go up to the podium and give us, we usually plan around 10 minutes for this, and we'll also have questions for you afterwards if there is any. So thank you, James, for coming.
Okay, wonderful.
Thanks, Phil. When Phil asked me to speak in front of the Growth Committee, he asked me why St. John. And really, to answer that question, we'd have to go back to my great-great-grandfather.
Mr. Crosby, can I just ask a favor? And I love to speak like you do too,
Okay,
but we're
sorry.
actually broadcasting, and there'll be, so we'll be able to capture all the history and all the great remarks so that we can share those out to the world. So, thank you.
Okay, so am I being
Yeah, perfect.
caught
Yeah.
now? Okay,
Yeah.
good. So we'll have to go and ask, the story goes back to my great-great-grandfather, Lorenzo George Crosby. So Lorenzo was an entrepreneur living in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, and his father owned a general store. And so they would export fish and lumber from Atlantic Canada to the Caribbean, and they didn't want their ships to be coming back empty, so they would import puncheons of molasses. So in the late 1890s, Lorenzo George was not satisfied with being located in Yarmouth. He wanted to grow his business, and he needed to be closer to the customers that he wanted to serve. In order to do that, he moved to St. John. For me personally, I went away to school in Ontario, and after graduating, I went to work in Montreal for 3 years. And for me, I was looking for more personal growth. I had a great 3 years at Atlantic Sugar, working in their logistics department. I learned a tremendous amount, but I like new challenges, and I wanted to take on more responsibility. So there was an opportunity that came up at Crosby Molasses Company, and between you and I, it really helps when the boss is your father.
Does it? Or I don't know.
Oh, it does.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Well, it helps to get the job.
Yeah.
So I moved back to St. John in 2006. So we're a small food manufacturer located here in St. John, competing in a global marketplace. So for us, growing in the food industry is extremely challenging. It's a very consolidated grocery industry in Canada. There are really only about 5 players that represent about 80% of the volume. So when you get into trying to launch new products, develop new products, get listings, it's extremely expensive. To launch a new product nationally is in the millions of dollars, and then there's no guarantee that your product's even going to be successful. So how we've sought to diversify our business has largely been through private label contracts. So that means manufacturing brands like President's Choice or Compliments or Great Value on behalf of the various grocery stores. More recently, how we've sought to grow our business is through contract manufacturing. So in the food industry, there are lots of very large multinational players, and generally speaking, they're not making investments in new plant and equipment. Instead, what they're looking for is companies like ours to manufacture products on their behalf. So back in 2013, we were approached by a large global food manufacturer who had heard of us through a mutual supplier. And they were basically struggling to meet the demands for the Canadian market. So they were sourcing product for the Canadian market out of a much larger plant in the U.S. And they were given basically one production day a month, let's say, to produce a different formulation and a different package, and they weren't satisfied. So we got into discussions with them. And we made we decided to make a large investment. So we invested nearly $9 million in plant and equipment back in 2013. We added 30,000 square feet of production space. And we had a lot of support from our bank, from government organizations like EDGE here in the city, ACOA, ONB. And we started manufacturing for this global food company. It wasn't easy. The expectations that they had on us were much higher than we were accustomed to. And it took us the better part of 2 years before we were actually producing at the efficiency levels that they were expecting. But we have a very determined bunch, and we stuck with it. And today I'm cautiously optimistic that we're on the verge of renewing another 5-year term. And they're talking to us today about future growth opportunities. So back in 2013, we had 53 full-time employees. Today, we have 110, and on that particular powdered beverage line, we're operating 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. So it's been a great story for us. And when we talk about future growth opportunities, and this doesn't apply to Crosby Molasses Company, this is a separate company at a separate location that we're calling EYG Consumables, but we're very interested in taking our skills at producing safe quality food at scale into the cannabis space. There's a tremendous amount of interest in smokeless forms of cannabis, especially the non-psychoactive cannabinoid CBD. But in order to produce food products containing CBD, you need to be in a purpose-built facility that's licensed by Health Canada. So our focus right now, we bought a plot of land in the industrial park back in January, and we're finalizing our design on this facility as we speak. We're hoping to break ground in the next couple weeks. But really, we can't go through that final licensing phase until the building is complete. So our focus is very much on that at the moment. So from what I understand, the goal of the Growth Committee is to increase the tax base, it's to increase employment, and it's to grow the population. So I'm not going to claim to have the answers to any of those questions, but I do know that we have to support our local businesses, and we have to ensure that we devise public policy that helps our businesses be competitive globally. So I guess the question that I would have for the committee is what has to change to make St. John the best place in the world, not just to grow a business, but also to start a business? Because when businesses are successful and businesses are growing, well, that takes care of all three of your objectives. So I believe that people move to St. John for one reason. It doesn't matter if it's me, it doesn't matter if it's my great-great-grandfather. People move to St. John for opportunity and the promise of a better life. And I think we all have responsibility to help tell that story. So in closing, I would just like to invite the members of the Growth Committee to come on a tour of our operation. I'd be really excited to show you firsthand some of the things that we're working on. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Questions, comments? Go ahead, Councillor McKenzie.
Thanks for coming in and sharing your story with us. I guess one of the questions that I have is, you seem to move very quickly on this, edibles, right? And I think your product that you presently make is going to make it easy for you, because I love molasses. I know a lot of people do. But is there competition in the area for that, or because I know there's other suppliers that are looking at it, and I'm just wondering, is it a big concern?
Oh yeah, no, there will be lots of competition in the space, but essentially the regulatory environment is such that there aren't, like, in order to get into the space, you're not able to produce edible cannabis products in the same facility as conventional food.
Right.
And the licensing process is extremely onerous and time consuming. So I don't think we're going to be necessarily the first company, the first food company in the space, but a lot of the initial offerings, I believe, are going to be the licensed producers and the cultivators who honestly, they have their hands full building out their cultivation operations. And I think, generally speaking, they're underestimating the complexity of producing safe quality food at scale. Like, this is something that we've been doing for 140 years, and we have our challenges sometimes. So I don't think we will be the first to market, but I do believe that we will be among the first.
Excellent. Well, listen, I wish you the best of luck, and I'd love to see the facility.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, the facility I'm talking about is Crosby Molasses Company.
Yeah.
No, and that's what I meant.
Yeah, I arranged for a tour the other day, and the person actually showed up at the vacant lot for the tour. So it is good to clarify that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Deputy, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to say thank you very much for your presentation. It's great to listen to your history of your company, and you've been here in St. John forever, from the very beginning, and you're one of the companies in our city that you go about your business very quietly and do what you have to do, and your name is certainly in part of this world anyway, North America, everybody loves molasses. So, I mean, you just do a great job on that, and I appreciate that you stayed in St. John and gone through those 5 generations. I think there's not very many companies that have had 5 generations in our city, that's gone from one generation to the other. And I wish you all the best, of course, and certainly would love to take the tour. Do you have, I know that you have Bridget Olin out there, and she's always doing the recipes
Yes.
with the molasses cookies and all that stuff, so I imagine that you'll have lots of cookies on your tours. And we have...
Is that the only way to get you there?
We have Victoria Clark here today from Discover St. John, so she looks after bringing conventions in. I don't know whether you do that in the summertime on a regular basis or not, but I bet a lot of our visitors to St. John would love to go through your facilities.
Yeah, no, I can certainly ensure that if you come to our facility, we can have some molasses cookies for
Okay,
you.
all right. That's good, but I do want to say, all the best to you, because you're a great community supporter, and it's wonderful to have you in St. John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. Councillor Armstrong.
Maybe we can get the cannabis ones there, Deputy.
That's
I just-
it's a separate building. Have you
I just want to say you're the oldest family business probably in New Brunswick, still going.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure exactly when Moosehead and Ganong started, but I think they might actually be a
little
bit
bit.
older.
Yeah, but is Moosehead older? I don't know.
Yes.
I think
Are they
they're
older?
a little bit older.
Little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I thought you guys, because you know what, as a child, we all grew up with Crosby. It's nice to see a family business still successful in a world market. So I just want to congratulate, thank you for coming in, and I look forward to the tour, without the cannabis cookies. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I went on the tour. Thank you, James. I didn't get any molasses cookies, Deputy, so I'm coming back with you because it's my all-time favorite. Look, thank you very much for the presentation today. I think this piece of our agenda is meant to, to celebrate the many successes that are happening in St. John. We're often talking about doing a better job of that, but also just as you've done today. I mean, to hear and to be provoked, if you will, positively provoked. You asked what has to change to make St. John the best place, and I wrote down to live, work, and play. And that people are really seeking incredible quality of life and new opportunities. And, we've had a real shift in our narrative in many ways in New Brunswick, in that we have many jobs. We need to attract a lot of talent. So I would characterize that as that we have a tremendous amount of opportunity ahead of us. And I think for our region, what I believe is the answer to that question that you've posed, is that I think we need to grow and thrive and come together as a greater region of St. John. We need to, and I think we're on the cusp of this. If we can all, come together and dream big, and address some what I would call fundamentals. I'd call it a merger of if it was a corporate discussion, it'd be a merger of a bunch of like-minded people who all bring something slightly different to the table. But I want to be crystal clear. I'm not describing an amalgamation. I'm describing a working alliance that puts the fundamentals in place. So I think if we can figure that out, we'll supercharge this region. We'll take down those little internal scuffles, if you will, and then we'll be able to present that unified vision, so that companies like yours can continue to thrive and attract and many of the other companies that we all know need great talent. So I'm really excited by the potential if we can all come together on that piece. I think within that is the same reasons that brought Lorenzo George Crosby from Yarmouth to St. John, is the very same reasons that we can attract, again, and we just need to scale it up. As we know, we need about 120,000 new people to New Brunswick over the next 15 to 20 years, and obviously St. John has to play a massive role in that. We've done it in our past, and we can do it in our future. So I really thank you for your presentation today. I'm really excited for your new venture, EYG. Did I get that right? EYG. I'm really excited to see you break ground, and I know we have a whole team of folks here who will support you in any way we can, and new and emerging and interesting. Who would have thought, that even a few short years ago that we would have these types of new and innovative manufacturing and food consumable companies opening up. So we wish you all the best. We thank you for 140 years in St. John, and these are stories that many places around the country they don't get to celebrate 4 and 5 and 6 generations together and still thriving, and we really appreciate you coming in today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, who would be the best person to coordinate some type of plant tour for the Growth Committee?
Yeah, through the clerk's office. So Phil will message you, and we can get you an email to the clerk, and then we'll coordinate that.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thanks very much, Mr. Crosby. Okay. Can I have receive and file, please? Second. Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Anybody contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Okay, thank you. And then council, committee, excuse me, we're going to move up just the growth fund resolution out of our closed session. So do we just want to speak to that, Ms. Hamilton, for a moment? Okay.
Yes, members of the committee. So this item is to a recommended allocation from the city's growth reserve of $30,000 to support an accelerated community standards program for the remainder of 2019. This program has been tied to the city's growth efforts and is tackling unsightly premises and zoning refractions linked to growth outcomes in the community has had a strong success with over 95 cases resolved to date, and with additional resources, we'll leverage an additional 40 cases throughout the remainder of 2019. So we are recommending that the committee make a recommendation to council to move forward with this accelerated program.
Okay. Yes. Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Okay, thank you. And Councillor McKenzie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think this is, if not the best, one of the best programs that we have. I think in terms of it as being an investment, because the $30,000 that we're using to enhance the community standards program is money that we spend now, but we get back from the provincial government later. So it's not a dollar spent and never spent again. It's a dollar spent, but you can keep on spending it as an investment. So I'll be supporting the motion and thank the committee for all the work on the community standards program.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Yeah, just a very quick echo, Ms. Hamilton, and to the whole team. Just doing exceptional work, and this is something that we all, as committee members or council members, hear regularly from members of the community, and whether it be community standards type infractions, if you will, or opportunities to do better, or with our dilapidated buildings program, we've really had tremendous success over the last number of years, which is now creating new opportunities for investment, and it is something that again we regularly hear from the community, and it's really wonderful to be able to say, this is our program, this is what we're doing, this is why we're investing, and the types of results that you've presented today in our discussions are just fabulous, and you have to invest in these types of programs to make them be successful. So we really thank you for that. Okay, thank you. On the question, all those in favor? Anybody contrary minded? Not seeing any. That's carried. Thank you. City Manager, did you want to jump in?
For the next one.
Okay, sorry, I was just going to quickly move up the priority infrastructure, just because Councillor Armstrong has to leave. Okay, so I'm just going to move up again, 1.5, if I could, committee, priority infrastructure projects. It was just a verbal and quick presentation. I do have a resolution here, and then it was my thought to get it onto the agenda, and I'll provide you a bit of context. The resolution reads that the City of St. John's top 3 infrastructure funding requests to federal and provincial governments, with the exception of emergency response related funding, include 1, a new school in the Central Peninsula, 2, development of the Fundy Key site, and 3, the Foster Thurston Ashburn Lake Road NB Route 1 interchange project. So that would be the resolution, and some of the background on it, Council, is just, or Council Committee, excuse me, is that we have, these are the catalytic growth projects for the city. Each one of these has the potential to unlock hundreds of millions of dollars in investment. The school would be a little bit smaller than that, of course, but the other 2 would unlock hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. They would bring momentum. They would bring needed tax-based growth to the community. And what I'm asking is if committee would support that, to take it to council, where we could provide certainly some more background at council, to be able to say to our provincial and federal funding partners, these are the 3 big growth projects that we support. And we have certainly heard feedback over the years that probably all municipalities hear this is, which is your priority? Which one do you want? And certainly we've put an awful lot of energy and effort into these projects. Develop St. John, city staff, and other agencies have been leading the charge. And they're each down the road quite a distance, and I think it would be very positive, in my view, to send a signal to our local MLAs, ministers, and to the provincial and federal governments that these are the projects that we would like to see move ahead. Okay, thank you. Moved. Second by Councillor Armstrong. Thank you. On the question? Okay.
Well, I'm on. I'm just, I'd like to know the value. I mean, if we're going to recommend this to council, I guess I can wait until council, but
yeah.
We need to know the value of the projects and a little bit more in detail. Yeah. I think, because I'm not sure I would want the waterfront development to be ahead of the school, but, because schools are really the responsibility of the province. and not municipal government. And we probably wouldn't have anything as far as funding goes to be involved in on a school project. I
Right.
mean, and the school's great, not against it or anything, but I don't know whether we should take a little bit more time to talk about it, because if we recommend it to council, then the council's going to need a presentation.
Yeah, so
And the other thing on the Foster First, and we don't have, it's been there, and it's been talked about in conjunction with the crossing. But it's been quite some time before we've had a detailed, presentation on it to know what it costs and how it's going to work, and,
Sure.
how everything's going to tie into it. So this is kind of just a
Sure.
quick,
Yep.
To
Mi- Microphone?
Sorry.
Please, yep.
That's exactly what we're doing, isn't it? We're putting those three forward to go to council so that we can have this discussion and find out all the details and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair comment,
Yeah,
Deputy.
no.
I didn't explain myself well enough. The
I
intention.
just want to make sure that's what we're
Yep.
doing, because it
But you
certainly makes a
wanna-
fair comment, but I want to make sure that when we take this to council, all of that's going to be discussed and worked out.
Yeah,
but are we putting them in order today?
No, so the intention was to say, look, I think there's a lot of work that's been done on these files. We've all received briefings through the process, but we're due for an update. The intention is to bring this to council with a presentation, so that they can be, so that folks have an opportunity to hear where we are. There's no sort of cost commitments. I mean, as we know, we've already received some funding on the Fundy Key on the Coast Guard site for what I would call, climate adaptation type seawall and other phase one upgrades to that site. The intention would be to have a wholesome discussion at council and to say these are the top three catalytic growth potential projects for the city, and just to signal to the provincial government that there's alignment, that these are the top projects, and as we can imagine, the provincial government is likely lobbied on a daily basis out of St. John. I think it's really important that council say these are the three that we think are, I'll use the term game changers. These have the potential to deliver hundreds of millions of dollars in economic stimulus and many hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue for the city, which is most needed. So for today, I think your question was fantastic, Deputy. The intention would be to bring a full presentation to council. Yep.
And there's no order then, they're
No,
just the
it's
three
the top three,
projects.
yeah.
Well, okay.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Anybody contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Okay, and City Manager. Next item is the municipal accommodation levy update.
Your worship, members of the committee, the city of St. John, as you are very well aware, has had a rich history of over a decade of a voluntary accommodation levy. It is, quite frankly, provincially leading in that regard, and has been a tremendous success story for the city of St. John in terms of contributing to tourism. Working closely with the Hotel Association, the city of St. John developed the process for the volunteer accommodation levy, and in fact, Discover St. John is the creation from that volunteer levy. Over the last few months, the provincial government has taken that industry-leading example and has passed legislation enacting a mandatory accommodation levy within the province, with one major city, the city of Moncton, having already passed its enabling bylaws and has started the collection of the mandatory levy. Today, to the committee, we wish to provide you an update on our project or process towards enacting the legislation for the mandatory levy. Before I hand over to Phil Willett and Paulette Hicks from the Hotel Association, I would be remiss, Your Worship, and members of the committee, to not recognize the Discover St. John staff team that is here at this meeting for their outstanding contributions and efforts to the city over the last decade, and certainly over the last 5 years of their current mandate. And in fact, if we had the time to go through all of their key performance indicators, we would quickly recognize, again, how tremendous their contributions have been. But for today, just as the city manager, I would simply like to recognize those contributions and the fact that they are here to listen to this update. And without further ado, who am I handing over to first?
Oh, to me. Paula Hickson,
Paula
sorry,
Hicks.
and Glenda is here as well, the chair of the board. So just want to recognize Glenda. Thank you for being here. And Paulette, over to you.
Great.
Good morning.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Paulette Hicks. I'm the general manager of Delta St. John and president of the St. John Hotel Association. So I'm just going to give a brief update with respect to the role that the Hotel Association is playing with the new accommodation levy. So everyone knows Discover St. John obviously is the organization that promotes tourism in our region and has done a great job. It's great to see the entire team here today. Two co-funding partners, so the St. John Hotel Association and the City of St. John. We've enjoyed 2 5-year contracts, so our relationship is 10 years in the making. So just to give you a brief overview of timelines, so the St. John Hotel Association was incorporated in 2007. Prior to that, the tourism department was in City Hall, which many of you will remember. There was a time actually where there was some change that was required just because there had been some, a bit of a collapse, to be honest, in the city department. So there was an opportunity in 2007, probably 2006, where we worked really hard to get the legislation in place provincially. At the time, New Brunswick wasn't ready for it, so St. John decided that we would do a voluntary levy. The relationship with the city and the industry came together, and we formed the St. John Hotel Association and began the collection. And in 2010, the two partners actually formed a public-private DMO, which is Discover St. John. So those contracts included sales, marketing, looking at the destination as a whole from positioning, managing the visitor information centers, event attraction, which included meetings and conventions, sport tourism, all the things that we've enjoyed over the last few years. So confidentially, as trying to be transparent, we definitely wanted to share, what we've collected. So when we started collecting in 2010 from the DMF, which actually started off at 2%, you can see where we collected, just over 400,000. And when you look at today, 2018, still under the voluntary model, at 3%, because there were changes throughout there, we were collecting just under $1 million. So you saw a lot of growth, which certainly has been a great investment into Discover St. John, who've leveraged those funds for major growth in the industry. So some of the major accomplishments, we'd feel that it really was transformational change. St. John certainly has taken on a whole new look and feel through this investment and leading through with the industry and Discover St. John. There's no doubt that, Discover St. John is considered a model for the rest of Canada. As the city manager indicated, Moncton is well on their way, and they're actually going to emulate the model that St. John has had here in our city. No doubt that it's considered best in class by Destination Marketing Association of Canada, and that we've done a great job in our industry with Discover building our pipeline with lots of things that are coming to St. John in future years, right up to 2022, 23 actually, that are on the books. So we're pretty excited. We think we have a really talented team. They've been laser focused. They're certainly top in their class for what they bring to Discover St. John. We've got great alignment in our industry with our partners, with hotels. It's probably one of the biggest parts of our model is that we actually have everyone rowing in the same direction. It's a real collective approach. So our results. So I think one graph that I wanted to share today is just taking a look at our last 15 years in this city. And if you look at it, in 2011, in 2011, 2018, we saw major growth. And when you look at Discover St. John, they opened their doors in 2010. First full year of operations was 2011. But you fast forward to 2018, and you look at the growth that we've had in hotel occupancy. And I look at hotel occupancy because that is one of the true markers across our industry, across North America. And when you look at this, you actually see that we've grown 6.6 million, but it's actually 21.3% increase overall, which from a business perspective is really compelling. A couple of things in this slide that I'd want to point out is 2008 was a recession. Obviously, we were going in the wrong direction from a trend line. We started the collection in 2007, and then 2010, again, Discover St. John was formed. So if you look at those early 5 years where Discover, from 2011 to 2015, that was really the rebuilding, getting the team in place, making sure that we had our digital strategy, all of the assets that we need to actually reposition and sell St. John. But if you look at 2015, that's when we were ready, and you actually put in the jet fuel, and you started to see things take off. So that would be one of my biggest messages, is that St. John is a success story. Often we don't take the moment to just pause and take a look at how hard this competitive market is, but St. John did it right, and I think, it is a compliment that the province of New Brunswick is implementing a levy, potentially, province-wide, based on the success that St. John has done. So kudos to the team, kudos to the industry, and kudos to a great partner. The city has been a great partner with the St. John Hotel Association, and we're very thankful for that. So, one great city. Over to you, Phil.
Are we going to play the awesome video? It makes me, it tears me up. It's so awesome. So we're not playing the video.
If we have time at the end, we certainly will.
Perfect, yeah.
I think the
We do have time.
speakers are set up.
I want
for
the
it.
video.
Thank you, Paulette, for that great summary and for the continued partnership on this. And certainly would like to acknowledge the staff and the chair of the board who are here as well today. Just to give you a little context of what's happened more recently, the discussion on a mandatory accommodation levy has been one that's been had for a while now. It's not a new discussion point. The City of St. John has been active on this as a municipal government, and if you're well informed that this is a new revenue source. If it's mandatory, we did it voluntarily, and that's great, but this is a new revenue source the province could offer to the city by saying that we'd enact this. The cities of New Brunswick has been advocating for this for years. The Tourism Industry Association has been an active player in this for many, many years, and in 2018, it was one of the promises in the election that, especially from the Progressive Conservative Party, on the introduction of a mandatory accommodation levy. So, in March 2019, an accommodation levy piece of legislation was introduced as draft, and as of June, it's been proclaimed as law within the government of New Brunswick. And it does not force anybody to do anything. It is enabling, so it allows municipalities who choose to participate to enact bylaws to take advantage of it, but it does not force anybody to do anything. We've also handed out copies of that amendment to the Local Governance Act as well, if you're interested in reading up on it. So what do we need to know about this particular piece of legislation? When we talk about the government of New Brunswick informing municipalities exactly how to do their work. We call that a prescriptive approach. We're going to tell you exactly how to govern, and these are the rules, and these are the parameters. This piece of, this amendment to the Local Governance Act is really the opposite. It's really provided municipalities with a lot of room to decide what it is they want to do with that accommodation levy. They're not forcing. So it's very permissive, and that is, from a municipal standpoint, something else that municipalities have been advocating for years is allow cities and municipalities become masters of their own destiny and let us define what is right for us. And so that's certainly one of the themes. Also, the levy would be remitted to local governments to fund tourism, promotion, and development. So those are the parameters of what the funds can be used for according to the legislation. We are actively working to try to define what this bylaw might look like for the City of St. John. We do not have all the answers, and we're not here today to claim that we have a piece of bylaw that we're ready to introduce, but we did want to share with you what we do know so far. One is that St. John will maintain the existing voluntary levy until the end of 2019. So we're not rushing to introduce a bylaw this year. It's not our intention. We'd like to introduce one in early 2020 or earlier, but to have it active in 2020. Tourism will continue to play a central role in St. John's future growth efforts. As you've heard from Paulette and from the comments from the city manager, tourism is a major contributor to economic growth and to our economic strategy. So this will continue to play an important role into our future economic development ecosystem in the city. Into 2020, St. John must build off of the success of the 10 years. So nobody that I've discussed is talking about reinventing the wheel by any means. So it's to build off of what we already have. One of the things, too, that I've heard very often, I'm sure you as well, is that the work of Discover St. John has been so successful. It'd be really great to see greater synergies with the other economic development functions on how they do their work. So in terms of marketing the city, it'd be great if we could learn from that and do that with our development. We could do that with our employment, with our population growth, any other kind of functions within economic development. We should really build off of what's already been done with Discover St. John. Staff do intend to introduce a bylaw to Common Council, and we're very much keen on unlocking that government in New Brunswick new legislation. The City of St. John is committed to building alignment with the other cities of New Brunswick, so we're actively in communication. You know, one of the objectives here is that we would have very comparable, if not very, almost the exact same parameters between the cities. That's very difficult because it was enacted to say cities choose for yourself, and every municipality is going to decide what it is for them. But we still want to try to build consistency into the broader landscape across New Brunswick. So we are very much in contact with Fredericton and Moncton on this. And we will do that with the cities of New Brunswick as well. The other piece of this is that we want to make sure that we invite regional partners to this conversation as well, and that there's an ability to build alignment. So we want to make sure that this is not just an accommodation levy for St. John. That's how a bylaw would be enacted, but it could be invited to be something bigger into the future. So we might not be able to accomplish that in 2020, but into the future, if it has to build and grow into something larger, we certainly would like to invite that level of cooperation and alignment. The other one that I've already mentioned is that working with the St. John Hotel Association, learning from their experience and their involvement in this, as well as industry and partners throughout. So this will be a theme into the coming weeks and months, is to engage a broader group of stakeholders into this, getting more input. And a mandatory accommodation levy in St. John will yield new revenue, and you've heard that through conversations. The Growth Committee and council members have heard that it's still unclear exactly how much it is. There's a lot of assumptions on what's eligible, what's not, but we'd be looking at somewhere between $300,000 to $600,000 additional $1,000 a year that would be yielded from that mandatory levy, and those are still preliminary numbers. So just in terms of timelines, as I had mentioned, we want to do engagement with stakeholders. That will be happening as of today and onward. October, we'd really like to introduce an initial bylaw for consideration to Common Council, and have some period of time to review that as a community, make necessary tweaks that need to be made, and by November we'd be adopting a new bylaw. And again, with the objective that January 2020 we'd have a full new mandatory accommodation levy. So that's it that I have. We're open for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy?
Thank you, Phil, and thank you, Paulette. It's worked very well for St. John in the past, as you do now. So the new bylaw, it's still not really mandate to any hotel. So just for instance, the Delta decided they wanted to get out of this, you could still opt out, or you can't.
So currently today in the voluntary, the way it works is that we have opted in, so by contract, legally, we are in. Now, there is an out. If we wanted to get out today, we could. But with enabling legislation, once the municipality enables this, it is mandatory for the region. So it is not optional for the Delta going forward. If the legislation is in place to opt out, it really is a mandatory collection.
So we have to have the bylaw in place before
You have to
that
enable
comes
it,
in.
correct.
Okay, so then, once we have the bylaw in place, like, can you go out to the Amsterdam Inn or the Chateau Lawn? Can they be brought in ahead of time?
Yeah, so those are the opportunities, and, what I would say to you is that obviously the core of the municipality is the St. John market, but we've already had partners reach out to us in Charlotte County, St. Andrews, in other areas that, are small, and if they collect, they would collect that under their own legislation or how they enact it, but then they want to use that money to leverage and partner with a bigger DMO. So that's what we're seeing throughout the province, Moncton and Fredericton, and St. John. So St. John, obviously, there's some partners in southern New Brunswick, like St. Andrews and Charlotte County, as well as Quispamsis and obviously St. Martin's, we work already very closely with. But if they were able to do that collection, they're able to take those funds and either spend them on their own, or they could look at partnership opportunities. And I think that's really what Phil was referring to, is that we could find some really good alignment here, and other partners would have money.
Great, great. And so right now, you don't collect the money through Fredericton, you collect it here.
Correct. So the collection is done directly with the hotels, submitted to a third party, and then granted to Discover St. John.
So will we do it the same once the bylaw's in place, or do we have to go to Fredericton? The money has to go to Fredericton?
City manager?
Deputy Mayor, we're still exploring all the options. We will most likely collect it locally, most likely through city staff, and then distribute it from there. It will not be collected via Fredericton.
So there won't be any additional fee, like, in Fredericton had to collect it. They were, in the past, when we were lobbying for this, there was a fee associated
Yeah,
with
they
it.
would,
So that
yeah,
won't
they,
happen.
they would probably hive off an administrative fee to collect it on our behalf. We are not going down that road.
Okay. Well, hopefully it all work out and we'll get a few extra dollars. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think, I don't see any other questions. Phil, just a point of clarity on, I can't remember, from the time that the government said, the province said, yes, we're going to do this, to the time they put the legislation through, how long was that?
Yeah, that's from March 2019 to June it was proclaimed.
So you can pass legislation quickly when you'd like to? Okay, excellent. I just wanted to register that. Thank you. Yeah, so look, I think, thank you for all the work. I think it's a great opportunity. I couldn't echo enough the comments. I mean, any of the discussions we're having around economic development right now are about how do we build on the successes we're having, and you can't say the word success without talking about Discover St. John. I mean, it's just end of statement, hard stop, mic drop. It's so how do we supercharge that? That's what I think the numbers, here, I hope we can continue to grow those numbers. When we saw the graph, Paulette and Glenda and others that showed that's what we need. We need every business in St. John. We need the city of St. John. We need all of us entrepreneurs. We need those graphs all heading in that upward momentum in that direction. And that's exactly the conversations we're having. I mean, we're talking hotel, accommodation levy today, but I'm really incredibly proud that we are having all of the right conversations right now within the city, from my perspective. In the media a couple of nights back, we talked about this particular subject like there was an additional new $1 million or $1.5 million or $2 million. I think it's important just to clarify that there may be some differential between what we collected and what we may collect in the future. It could generate some potential new revenue, to your words, Mr. Ouellette, for the city, but I would also want to be having that conversation about how do we continue to supercharge the marketing and promotion of the St. John region with, call it the work today that we would know as Discover St. John, so we can remain competitive, so that we can attract those conferences, so we can do all the things that we've been doing to keep ourselves on the map. And this is, I think, really positive, but we also need to note that, I think it's no time to sit back and rest on our laurels here, if you will, because other communities now have a new mechanism in which to invest, right? So I guess for this person, me, I don't necessarily today see that as a bunch of new revenue for the city. I'd say, how do we continue to supercharge and accelerate the growth of the community, not just in tourism events and other, but in all areas of economic development. So that's sort of the conversation. But I do think, I think the partnership with the Hotel Association has been fabulous. I think, Discover St. John and the work that they do, boy, is fantastic. And not only that, but they also tell their story so well in terms of metrics and performance. And again, I think all of us could learn a few lessons there. So in closing, for me, it's not about unraveling. It's about supercharging. It's about building on the success, and it's about figuring out how we take ourselves to another level. And what I love most about the Hotel Association and its members, and Discover and its members, is that it's not a group that really I've ever would use the word. They're rarely satisfied with what they did last year. They're happy. They celebrate. But then they say, let's go blow all those goals out of the water again for next year. That's sort of how business works, and I really admire that within your two organizations. Thank you very much. City Manager, do you want to jump back in, and then I'll go to Councillor McKenzie.
Your Worship, just to add on to what you said by giving a bit more clarity on the numbers, right now the volunteer levy produces, in round numbers, approximately $1 million per year. The mandatory level we are forecasting will provide more for two reasons. The first reason is we will capture those few outliers who do not currently contribute to the voluntary levy. But that number is relatively small. The other reason we will end up collecting more is that the 8 cities of New Brunswick have come to an informal agreement, it's not binding at all, that we are all going to aim for an accommodation levy of 3.5% as the recommendation to our councils. So between that increase from 3 to 3.5% and capturing the outliers, our estimate is that the additional revenue that would be collected within the city of St. John is in the neighborhood of $300,000 to $700,000 a year. Exactly how much, of course, depends on the occupancy rate within our hotels. So we can't lock it down to an exact number right now.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. That's one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the slide that you had, Paulette, was very interesting, but we didn't have it in the kit. That's a 15-year picture of where we're going, right? So when we talk about occupancy rates, they are obviously rooms must be filling up and vacancies going down, correct?
Correct.
So are we getting close to a point where you'd be looking at a new member being built here, another hotel?
Yeah, great question, because to the mayor's point, these are connected, there's no doubt. And if you look at that, it was actually a 15-year slide, what we've done really in the last 15 years.
Right.
And you saw in 2004, obviously, the occupancies were high enough because in 2008, we had 3 hotels built. So that was the other piece in that graph, is that we had an injection of 35% increase in our room inventory. We had the recession hit at the same time, bad timing, but we weren't recession-proof. And then you had Discover come on board to actually help mitigate that line and stop the bleeding, and then it started to go back up.
Right.
So if we were to put that graph up again, you would see, I'll do that just for funsies. You will see that we're actually starting to hit those high levels again. And, I'm not going to talk like I am a developer and an investor of a hotelier, but I've been through a number of acquisitions with previous ownerships, and I can tell you there is a certain number they look for in a destination before you see new builds and new ownership come into play. That trend line continues to grow, and you will actually see Develop St. John knocking on Discover's door to say we need to work together, because as you continue to grow, we now have investors who actually want to build more hotels in your region. So, great point, John. They're connected.
Right. And the other thing I wanted to say too is that the levy revenue that we get to the mayor's point and the city manager's point, I mean, when I look at Fredericton and Moncton, totally funded by the municipality, and now they're going to get an additional $1 million or whatever they're going to get, they're going to be supercharged. So we cannot sit back and say, you know what, we'll just take that 300 or 700,000 and put it over here. we need to invest, because
Yeah.
by sitting back is not going to grow. So I totally agree with these guys.
Yeah, and if you look at the trend line, you're right. So Moncton and Fredericton, there's no doubt there's momentum there. They will have to take some time to build as well. But in
Yeah.
a couple of years, once they have those funds in play and they have their strategy in play, you are going to see some good growth, which is fabulous for New Brunswick. But to the mayor's point, it's not time to rest on our laurels. We do need to double down. There is a great opportunity here for St. John to actually contribute even more to New Brunswick. And I think, the proof is in the pudding. This team's done a good job for us. They're a good investment, and we need to continue to see that trend line grow.
Yeah, well, compliments to the Hotel Association and Discover St. John team. It's awesome. Thanks
It's
for
been a
your
good
report.
partnership.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Councillor. Yeah, and just in sort of closing, we lost our quorum, so we won't be able to receive and file the report, but we thank you very much, and thank you, City Manager, Deputy Commissioner Roulette, and the Commissioner, and everyone else that's been involved in this work. I know it's on top of a lot of other files, so we truly appreciate it. I think the two things, just in closing for me, that I wanted to say about your last comments, Councillor and Paulette, is I think that example you used, that we're now getting back up to sort of the numbers where, hey, maybe some other interesting conversations could be happening. First of all, we have to track the numbers. We have to know the numbers. We have to have those scorecards, those metrics. It's not to, it's just to know, how are we doing? And then secondly, I think the opportunity becomes, how do we, in that old analogy of sort of being in the boat and rowing in the same direction. But when you are in a boat, a scull, and you're all on an oar and we're rowing, and we're saying, my gosh, things are going really well, occupancy rates are up, and then the person beside you says, wow, really, we're trying to grow tax base. Do you think we could attract a new hotel? It's having those conversations all interlinked. How can we help you discover St. John? How can Discover St. John help develop St. John? How can Develop St. John support Edge and so on? And I'll close with this. This is, I think I'm biased, one of the best committees because we're talking about such positive things all the time. There's so much to celebrate in St. John. There's a little bit of headwind, as you may have noticed in the media lately, but if we have the collective will, and we can push through this and we can thrive. And I truly, as I've said many times to our regional colleagues, is that I truly believe we're on the cusp, if the will is there, to have the most thriving greater region in all of New Brunswick. We're 125,000 people strong. We have incredibly passionate and dedicated, individuals. We have global business leaders. We have, we punch way above our weight class. So coming together, we should be doing so much together. Is just there's a couple of key success factors that if we can just push through them, and frankly, I believe politically push through them, we'll be off to the races. And I want Fredericton to thrive. I want Moncton to thrive. I want New Brunswick to thrive. But I believe we can be the community that everybody continues to look to say, boy, oh boy, you want to see it done right. You go to St. John or Greater St. John. Those folks know how to do it. And I believe 10 years from now, we're writing the script right now. What do we want 10 years from now to say? What do we want the story to read in 10 years? That's the opportunity that's in front of us right now. So, well, thank you everybody for a great meeting today. It's a little shorter meeting than normally we have, but thank you to all of our staff and everyone else that have made this possible again, and thank you for everyone attending. We'll call the meeting, we'll adjourn the meeting, but we can't even vote on it, so thank you.